What's up guys? So today we're going to be getting into the first of 3 time-lapse videos that I mentioned in my last upload. In this video we're going to be focusing on painting the engine bay, and I'm really excited to show you guys because from start to finish it's a pretty crazy transformation. Now just for some context, all this work was done last winter. It started around January and probably finished around May, but it's taken me a while to get around to this editing. But before we get too far into the video, I did want to give you guys a high-level overview of my build plan. So my goal is an aggressive street build that I can take to the track occasionally. I'll be keeping the original L28 engine, but I'll be upgrading to a Mega Squirt EFI with some 1000cc injectors and a BorgWarner 63mm turbo. My power goal is around 350 to 400 horsepower, running around 15 pounds of boost, and I should be able to check that on a dyno in the next coming months. I'm going for more of a resto mod vibe, so I'll be adding a couple custom pieces to the exterior with a black and gold color scheme. So hopefully that gives you guys an idea of what to expect for the build videos. But for now, let's get into painting the engine bay. So before we get too far into the video, I'm kind of just going to give you guys a current state of the project as I recorded this video. So at this point, you can see I had taken the engine block out of the car. It is essentially ready for paint at this point. If you can tell, I did a fair amount of grinding on it, and then I just covered up the majority of the openings and all the bolt holes so that no paint would get on the inside. So that's pretty much where I was at with the block. As far as the engine bay, I'm about done stripping all of the accessories out, and I'm about to start on cleaning everything up and starting to strip all of the paint. Most of the wiring harnesses are still left in there. A couple of those will come out before I go much further, but one of the problem areas is back here by this battery tray. It is going to have to be addressed further on in this video. I'm going to rip everything out and redo it. And then another problem area is down by the tow hooks in front. Those are another area that I'm going to have to cut it out, make a new panel, and weld it back in. So let's get started. Now that the fenders are removed and we brushed out some of the dirt, we're going to take some of this Safe Erase paint stripper here. We're just going to brush it on just to see how much of the paint we can remove. After that, we're going to use a wire wheel and just dig into it a little bit more. So I did end up running out of that Safe Erase paint stripper, but we got the majority of the engine bay covered. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to wait about 30 minutes, maybe an hour, until we whip out the wire wheel and a scraper and see how easily the paint comes off. After working at it for a little bit with the wire brush, some spots were still giving me a little bit of trouble. I was wondering whether the paint stripper I had was a little bit old or expired, so we're going to try a different brand and just do another application with this Citri strip. It's essentially the same thing, so let's see how it goes. So far I'm getting good results using the citrus strip and a rust removal bit on an angle grinder, but before we go too far, this battery tray over here that's all rusted out, we want to address that. So essentially what I'm going to do is I made a cardboard cutout of the overall shape and dimensions. You can see it lays in there fairly well. So what I'll do, I'll take that cardboard cutout, take some measurements for it, draw it up in SolidWorks, and then I'm actually able to water jet that profile at my work. So I'll water jet that and then use a brake press and bend something up that I will bolt in. So I did just want to give you guys a quick overview of how I actually went about making this part in SolidWorks. From that cardboard template, I took dimensions off of it and remade this sketch for the flat pattern version of the part. From there, I just made it into a solid, added an edge flange to it. It'll be sitting like this in the engine bay, this flange facing down, and then just added a couple additional features, including some mounting flanges at the side, and then some holes in it just to match the original bracket that was on there. And so now that that design is done, we're going to hop back over to the engine bay and we're going to cut out the old battery bracket. So the bracket you see me cutting out right now, this was used to mount the stock mass airflow sensor, and because in my setup I'm going to be running a Mega Squirt kit, I didn't need the bracket anymore, so I just decided to cut it out and grind it flush just to clean everything up. So throughout this paint stripping process, I used a combination of a rust removal disc on an angle grinder, a wire wheel on a drill, an abrasive wheel on a Dremel, and a flap disc on a Dremel. And let me tell you, it was a lot of work, especially in an engine bay. There's just a lot of uneven surfaces and nooks and crannies that are hard to get to. I think if I were to do this again, I would have seriously considered dry ice blasting, which I've seen a lot of people do in engine bays before, but with a little bit of elbow grease, you can do anything. So at this point, the majority of the engine bay has been stripped. Now, there are a couple areas where it was a little bit tough to get all of the rust out, especially over here by this battery tray. And if you can tell, there was actually a patch installed where it had already started to rust through by a previous owner, I'm guessing. But that's not a big concern. I'm just gonna put some rust encapsulator on there before I head to primer. But the next thing on my list is addressing these tow hook areas up here. They're pretty nasty. I'm gonna have to cut out as much of the rust as I can and then make new patches and weld them into place. Same thing with the other side, and actually I couldn't even get this bolt out, so I'm probably gonna have to cut that off, but that's the plan. So let's get to it. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to pressure wash the engine bay, mainly because there's a lot of gunk left over from the paint stripper that I used, and I just want to wash all that off. So we're going to use some industrial degreaser right here, spray everything down, and then we're going to pressure wash. So after pressure washing, I brought the car back inside, dried everything off, and then did one more round of real light sanding. You can tell that it really helped with a lot of the rust areas. I was able to get most of it addressed, and then any of the areas that I couldn't quite get to, I'm going to be addressing with some rust encapsulator from Eastwood. Basically, it just creates a paintable surface that stops any of the rust from spreading, so that's next on the list. Alright, so off camera I applied some Bondo around those plates that I welded in, and then I think we are about done with the rust encapsulator. It's looking pretty good, and I think it'll do the job for what we need. The next step is going to be to clean up the engine bay a little bit and prep it for paint, make sure we get all the dust and dirt out of it. You can see that I also did the same thing to the plate on the other side, just a little bit of Bondo and sanding. For the wheel wells, I will do some actual undercoating on those eventually, but let's start prepping. Alright, so next up I'm going to use a tack cloth and this TSP paint prep to just kind of wipe everything down, make sure the surface is really clean, and then I'm going to use this Eastwood epoxy primer as my base. So I did one more coat of primer off camera, but everything turned out pretty nice. It's really starting to transform at this point. It's quite a change going from the bare metal to even just a primer coat. So any parts on the wheel well that were still bare metal, I coated in the epoxy primer. But next up on our list is going to be some seam sealer. So I'm going to mask off any of the portions that I plan on using the seam sealer on, because you get some cleaner lines doing it that way. And then I'll apply the seam sealer, and then we'll move on to the final step of applying a low gloss finish. And to finish things off, we're going to apply this Eastwood Underhood Black. Alright guys, so unfortunately my camera died halfway through painting, but here's the final result. I think everything turned out really nice. It's a low gloss black finish. You can also see that I did not get around to installing that bracket that I had designed earlier. That'll actually be shown in a future video. For the wheel wells, I did do a coat of undercoating on top of that black finish, just to protect it a little bit better. But overall, I'm really happy with the results. Alright guys, so if you made it this far in the video, thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed this engine bay transformation, but I did also want to mention that I realized since this video was in more of a time-lapse format, there's bound to be a few things that I glossed over or didn't give much detail on. So if you are interested to know anything more about anything in the video or the process that I use, just leave a comment and I'll try to give some more context. So that's it for this video. Next video, we're going to be showing my L28 engine rebuild, also in more of a time-lapse format. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give a thumbs up, subscribe, and stay up to date on future videos.